So, good day, everyone. Just confirming that we are live, and yes, we are visible on X. Quickly check YouTube. And while we're gearing up here, we do want to wish everybody a peaceful and prosperous 2026, despite the insanities that we have witnessed in the first 2 weeks of this new year. It looks like we are also live on YouTube. How you doing, Rami, my brother?
I'm doing pretty good. I'm here in Bogota, Colombia, and I'm doing I'm making a report on the 10-year anniversary of the peace agreement. Back in 2016, the FARC EP, under the leadership of Timochenko, signed a peace agreement, essentially kind of disarming themselves and surrendering their weapons to the state in exchange for certain agreements that you'll get to learn more in my report. And on Sunday, I can't say the name right now, but I'm interviewing probably one of the most notorious Colombians. And this is going to be a very interesting interview.
Looking forward to it. Absolutely. We'll be very interested to learn what the current status of the revolutionary spirit is in Colombia, where I plan to join Rami later this month. Before we get into it, let's say hello to some of our friends. I see that Bobo is in the chat, sharing with me various inside jokes, which I won't get into. Bobo, by the way, is a first cousin of mine who follows assiduously our work. Nice to see you again, cousin. And we also have somebody, Asteris Bampos, how you doing? Suggesting a collaboration with Professor Zhang. That's a very interesting idea. Carlos Colazo from Fort Lee, New Jersey. Good day. Thank you for joining us. Alexander Karayanis is again with us. Great to see you, Alexander. Strugsesh, if I'm pronouncing that correctly. Good day. And Reese Khan from the UK, also back. So thank you very much, everybody, for joining us. Before we get underway, and just so you know what we plan to cover today, we're going to talk about the status of the regime change project, the U.S.-Israeli, really it's a Western project of regime change. And I think ultimately the destruction of Iran, what the status of that sinister project is. And then we're going to provide an update on the ongoing genocide in Palestine. And I'm going to talk a little bit about an interesting, shall I say, admission by the widely followed, widely respected Scott Ritter, a geopolitical analyst who's known probably to all of you, is very conspicuous in the alternative media. He had some interesting comments earlier this week about Donald Trump, which I'm going to share with you at the end. Before we get into it, though, I want to say a couple of words about Jamarl Thomas, who is a prolific podcaster in the anti-imperialist space. I've appeared on his show many times. Jamarl put out a video a couple of days ago, I think it might even have been yesterday, in which he revealed that he has suffered a mini stroke. And he assures everyone that his program will continue. And that's great news, but I'm very saddened to hear about the health difficulties he's confronting. And so those of you who know of Jamarl's work, he does outstanding work. If you could, maybe go to the video he posted on his YouTube channel where he discusses his health challenges and just wish him well. I'm sure that would help to lift his spirits, but he's showing a really impressive amount of courage in the face of the difficulties he's confronting. So we wish him a swift, full, and speedy recovery. Now, another thing we want to mention is that we now have our French channel, Radio Resistance, up and running. We published our inaugural interview after a lot of preparation. Took a little longer than we would have liked, but we're happy to have it up and running. And Rami, why don't you tell us about, just briefly, about the inaugural interview that we've published?
So our first interview was with Dieudonné, probably one of the most notorious French comedians. I went to his show in Paris when I was there back in September, and it wasn't a bus because he's not allowed to rent any venues. He's not allowed to make any gatherings, organize any gatherings. And as soon as we got to this shady little park in Bois de Boulogne, Bois de Boulogne is a place where pretty much it's known for being like kind of a red light district in Paris. So when I told my taxi driver to bring me there, he was a bit sketched out. When I had to tell him that it was for this comedy show I was going to, it didn't reassure him at all. And as soon as we got there, the police raided us, kicked us out of the park, said Dieudonné is not allowed to make a show here. The next day, Dieudonné refunded us, gave me back new tickets. I went to go see his show again, and the show was great. And I was so shocked by the level of repression and censorship in France. I decided to talk to his agent. We booked an interview. That was back in October, I believe. And I went to his tiny little village around an hour and a half away from Paris, where we recorded an interview. He has an ankle monitor. And the crime that he committed is, as he says, he was avant-garde in his opposition to Zionism. So he was one of the first mainstream people to kind of call out Zionism in a provocative way. And that didn't sit well with mainstream media. And it was, honestly, he's an inspiring individual. He's friends with Ahmadinejad. He had shook hands with Muammar Gaddafi. I believe he might have been friends as well with Hugo Chavez. I'm not sure. But he's quite vocal in the anti-imperialist movements of the world and is in great solidarity with all oppressed and colonized people. And we spoke about the Kanak people, who are an oppressed, colonized people by France. You might know it as New Caledonia. So that was our interview with Dieudonné. Next week, we'll be publishing an interview with Francis Villemain. He's a lawyer who defended Carlos Ilich Ramirez, Maurice Papon, among other notorious people in France. And of course, my interview on Sunday, which we will post both on our French and English channels. So feel free to subscribe. We always put subtitles to make sure that it's accessible to as many people as possible.
And before we begin with our topics today, one last reminder to like and share this video. Hit the bell icon so that you get issue notices directly about each one of our videos. That'll ensure that the algorithm's impacts are minimized, namely its suppressive impacts on our type of journalism. And we also, again, we have a Rumble channel as a backup plan. We post all of our videos there. So it has the same name, Reason to Resist. And we hope you'll subscribe to that channel just in case one day we run into problems with YouTube. But up until now, we've had really none, thankfully. So let us begin then with the subject of the regime change project in Iran. We're going to examine the current state of play. For the time being, it appears that the anti-government protests have dissipated, if not ended altogether. On Monday, major demonstrations were held in support of the Iranian state in various Iranian cities. Of course, the rioting could resume at any time, but the Islamic Republic seems to have gained the upper hand over its internal opponents. And this leaves the Trump regime, of course, at a crossroads. I'm sure that he was hoping that the internal unrest would cause the collapse of the Islamic Republic, but that hasn't played out according to plan. So now he has to decide whether he's going to intervene militarily. And in weighing his next move, Trump, I would imagine, is concerned about the public mood in the United States because the midterm elections will be held in early November, less than 10 months from now. And a huge majority of Americans do not want the U.S. to intervene militarily in Iran. A poll published by Quinnipiac University 2 days ago, or yesterday actually, January 14th, found that in the wake of U.S. threats of military action against Iran, if protesters are killed, and protesters have been killed, that is clear. 70% of voters think the U.S. should not get involved, while a mere 18% think the U.S. should take military action against Iran. 12% did not offer opinion. So there's very, very little support for another military adventure in Iran. Independents opposed by 80% to 11%. Democrats 79 to 7%. Interesting that independents were even slightly higher than the Dems. And even a majority of Republicans, 53% oppose a military intervention. Only 35% support it. So this poll comes against the backdrop of Trump's approval rating, which remains low at about 42%. I have to say it's nonetheless amazing that Trump has an approval rating that high. And I think it's really a testimony to the power of the American propaganda system, that despite the chaos of the past 12 months, he still manages to gain the approval of, more than 2 in 5 Americans. What is even more amazing is that so many Americans oppose U.S. military intervention in Iran, despite the corporate media's obsession with the protests and its grotesquely one-sided coverage. And I'm just going to show you here a screenshot I took of the Guardian homepage a couple of days ago. 3 days ago was before the protests were brought under control. And you can see the top 5 articles are all about Iran. And they are either, these articles, the headlines indicate, are either highly critical of the Iranian government or adopt a neutral stance, maybe even a slightly positive tone with respect to Trump's consideration of a military option. So, and there were numerous other articles in the Guardian on that day. This reminded me, Rami, of the first few months of the war in Ukraine. I couldn't believe it. I mean, every day you go to the website of a major Western newspaper, it was all Ukraine, all Ukraine. That's all you could see. And we saw that again here. I'm almost at the point, Rami, where I'm starting to suspect that the editor-in-chief of The Guardian is an MI6 plant. I have no evidence to back that up, but it's insane how this supposedly progressive anti-war media outlet, which has a lot of influence amongst people who lean to the left in the West, at least those who speak English, that it consistently supports every regime change initiative, including the takedown of President Maduro in Venezuela, that the U.S. government has pursued since the current editor-in-chief of The Guardian replaced Alan Ruxberger, I think back in around 2014. In any case, the coverage in the mainstream media has shifted somewhat as this attempt to bring down the Islamic Republic by internal unrest has evidently failed. So what is Trump now saying? Trump now is making, I guess you could call them relatively conciliatory noises about what's going on in Iran. Here's comments he made to the press yesterday.
Ron, you said that the killing has stopped. Who told you that the killings have stopped there?
We have been informed by very important sources on the other side, and they've said the killing has stopped and the executions won't take place. There was supposed to be a lot of executions today, and that the executions won't take place. And we're going to find out. I mean, I'll find out after this. You'll find out. But we've been told on good authority, and I hope it's true. Who knows, right? Who knows?
We've seen the body bags, so how do you trust them?
No, you've seen that over the last few days, and they said people were shooting at them with guns, and they were shooting back, and it's one of those things. But they told me that there'll be no executions, and so I hope that's true.
Does this mean military action is now off the table against Iran?
Well, we're going to watch it and see what the process is, but we were given a very good statement by people that are aware of what's going on.
Is he still considering military action?
When they say no executions, everyone is talking about a lot of executions were taking place today. We were just told no executions. I hope that's true. That's a big thing.
What's your reaction to all of that, Rami?
Well, first of all, this is not the first time that kind of Trump kind of gives a Trojan horse, right? Where it seems like he's offering an olive branch. We saw this just, I don't know, 2-3 weeks ago when there was these negotiations for peace between Russia and Ukraine, and then all of a sudden we see an attack on Putin's residence. So I think I stopped listening to what Trump has to say, and you look at this. I think Just yesterday, Iran shut down their airspace for a couple of hours. Today, the IRGC said that they're on full alert. So regardless of what these words, I mean, it kind of mean wars about deception. Is he trying to deceive the Iranian people? He's deceived the Venezuelan people. He's deceived the Russian people, the Palestinians. So I don't really accord any importance to what he just said. And alternatively as well, it could be that he's giving indications to, because there's Mossad agents in Iran right now protesting. It seems like there's a cue there that the more there are killings, the more these killings are provoked, the more the images are gruesome, well, Trump will have a reason to intervene. So by claiming that he's stopped seeing killings, what he's actually saying is that if he sees images that he doesn't like, which are more than likely to occur if you can manufacture this. I mean, we've seen mosques being torched to the ground by these protesters. It's going to lead to a harsh reaction from Trump, and basically setting the conditions for what will lead to an intervention by the United States.
I couldn't agree more. So let's look at what Trump is actually doing. By the way, Donna Vorce, thank you for your comment. Shut the fuck up, you self-admitted groper of women and creeper on pageant girls in dressing rooms. Even Epstein, as Donna points out, said that Trump is a horrible person. Wow. Thank you for reminding us of all of that, Donna. In any case, let's again, as we've said many times on this program, what you really need to pay attention to is what Trump is doing, not what he's saying. This man, calling him a pathological liar is an insult to pathological liars. So before we get to that, I want to comment one thing about this video, this clip that we just showed you. It's sickening how he always portrays himself as the guy who scares the shit out of everybody, right? Oh, the Iranians are stopping the executions because they called me up and they promised they're not carrying out any executions. And the implication being that the threat that Trump poses to them has caused them to step back from the worst forms of punishment on those who are trying to overthrow the Islamic Republic. I doubt there's any truth to that at all, frankly. I don't know.
That is days after ICE killed a protester. Well, not even a protester, just a bystander in her car in Minnesota.
Yeah, and these lunatics are driving around Minneapolis, running people off the street, like literally just hitting vehicles in traffic, brutalizing people, not showing their faces, not giving any identification, has zero legal justification. It's all unconstitutional. But hey, let's concern ourselves over here in North America about what's going on in Iran. So that's the state of play in the White House. But out in the real world, let us look at what the Donald is doing. He ordered an aircraft carrier battle group, according to multiple reports, to move from the South China Sea. What the hell is it doing there to begin with? To waters near Iran. And here you see a report, one of the many from News Nation. The Pentagon is moving a carrier strike group from the South China Sea to the U.S. Central Command Area of Responsibility, which includes the Middle East, as tensions escalate. So this was January 14th yesterday, and it says that the movement of the carrier strike group is expected to take about a week. That doesn't sound like de-escalation to any rational human being, but it doesn't stop there, folks. In addition, an anonymous U.S. official has told Reuters that the United States was pulling some personnel from key U.S. military bases in the region as what the source described as a precaution given the tension. And here you can see a report yesterday in Al Jazeera. And the withdrawal, it pointedly mentions the Al Udeid military base, air base in Qatar, as one from which they are withdrawing personnel. This is the largest U.S. military base in the region. It dominates Qatar. I was actually there 2 years ago. I wasn't, of course, allowed into the base, but I did a report on the edge of the base. And it is truly gigantic. It doesn't only house U.S. forces. It houses British forces. The Qataris have forces there. This particular base was struck with great precision at the very end of the 12-day war. Although Trump claimed initially that Iran's ballistic missiles did no damage, subsequent satellite imagery showed that a missile struck and destroyed a very expensive, I think it was a radar facility or kind of like a dome that was intended for intelligence gathering purposes, and it just hit it on like a bullseye. So the Americans must understand at this stage that their military assets and personnel at this base are at risk. And of course, Iran has talked about a preemptive strike if it sees signs of an impending attack. And what are you to take from, the movement of an aircraft carrier battle group from the South China Sea to West Asia, and the buildup of other forces in the region? Those are clearly signs of an impending attack. And so I don't think it's out of the question that this time around the Iranians will strike preemptively. And although I'm no military expert and I don't want to see war, if in fact it is the U.S. intention and Israeli intention to launch another criminal war of aggression on Iran, I would think that a preemptive strike is precisely what they ought to do, and rather than allow the Americans and the Israelis to dictate the course of the coming conflict. But let us hope there is no strike by anybody. And I also want to point out that there was a large buildup of U.S. warplanes in the region. There were reports that they were transferring various types of fighters and bombers from European military bases to bases in the region. So again, plenty of signs of an impending attack, which raises the question about whether Iran will carry out its threat to execute a preemptive strike.
And
go ahead.
I also think that, there is essentially already a war in a sense where the United States imposed 25% tariffs on all countries that still trade with Iran. Iran is a major importer of rice from India. India has been, I think there's been some speculations online that India has cut exports of rice to Iran. So essentially, you're manufacturing a famine and a war against the Iranian people. So this war could be played into different forms, not just militarily with these Navy carriers or these ballistic missiles that are all pointed towards Iran. But more shockingly is the, I kind of define this as the pseudo-leftist to neocon warlord pipeline that I've been seeing online, essentially within like my network in Montreal, where I'm seeing them post their stories promoting the woman life freedom movement in Iran, calling Iran the regime, and repeating essentially Zionist propaganda. All is giving permission basically for Trump to have the necessary support from the population to push an invasion of Iran or to attack militarily Iran. And that is the same playbook that we saw with Maduro, where for years we've been hearing, baseless claims that Maduro's a dictator. And then the day of January 3rd, when it happened, then all of a sudden, it was not as shocking for many people than it should have been. Yeah.
I just want to share with you a comment from Catherine Foley, Mohammed Morandi. I was just about to talk about Mohammed Morandi, but I wasn't aware of this. Catherine says just 5 minutes ago, he said that no one from Iran contacted Trump. Oh, wow. How surprising that Trump is lying. And I just want to, again, stress that in the lead up to the 12-day war, the Trump regime was pretending to be negotiating with Iran over its nuclear enrichment program. And there was a meeting scheduled to occur the day after or 2 days after they launched their criminal attacks. The Israelis launched their US-backed attacks on Iran. So it is entirely possible, as you suggested, Rami, I think even likely, that this quasi-conciliatory language we just heard from Trump, it's just, Trump trying to pull another fast one on the Iranians. I doubt that that's going to engender any kind of complacency in the Iranian leadership this time around.
They assassinated Qasem Soleimani the same time he was supposed to go to a peace negotiation or some form of discussion, and then tracked his location and then assassinated him. It's rinse and repeat from Trump's side and the American side in general.
So, as I said before, I want to say a few words about a recent development involving Professor Morandi. Many of you will know him. He's an Iranian academic based in Tehran. He actually fought on the side of his country in the war against Saddam Hussein and was wounded. He speaks English impeccably and has been you know, widely covered. His views have been widely covered, even in the corporate media. And so recently he appeared again. He's been on Piers Morgan many times. I haven't actually watched it, but I watched an interview in which Professor Morandi described what happened. And I understand that this Piers Morgan episode this week, Professor Morandi was talking about the huge protests or demonstrations in Iran on Monday in support of the Iranian state. And there was video footage released, which we've shared, which appears to show a gigantic gathering of demonstrators in central Tehran, easily hundreds of thousands of people. Some say it's in excess of 1 million. And apparently Piers Morgan was claiming that this could be generated by artificial intelligence, that it wasn't real, even though Professor Morandi himself, a frequent guest on Piers Morgan's show, was at the protest and talked about how at one point there were so many people that they were worried about getting crushed in the throng, and things got a bit dicey for a while. But it was a peaceful protest. And in any case, as I understand it, in the middle of this rather spirited exchange between Piers Morgan and Professor Morandi, without any warning at all, and after Professor Morandi had said, "I'll only do an interview if do it solo. I don't want to be, debating with anybody on your program other than you." With no warning, Piers Morgan brings into the conversation this nefarious, putrid character from Canada by the name of Goldie Gamadi, who's an Iranian Canadian. And I'm going to tell you a little bit more about her in a moment, but she, following this exchange where she was just blasting Professor Morandi on Piers Morgan, she put out this post. This is Mohammed Morandi. There's a photo here of Mohammed Morandi, which I didn't include in the screenshot. He is the Joseph Goebbels of the terrorist Islamic dictatorship. Today on Piers Uncensored, I told Mohammed to his face that when Iran is free, the tip of his pinky finger will be the biggest piece of him after we Iranians are done with him, threatening him not only with death, but with dismemberment. It may probably won't surprise you to know that she is a lunatic, extremist Zionist. She's. I'm sorry.
I could tell by the tweet.
Yes.
By the
Yeah. And then she put out another one. Here's her next doozy, and this time she expands her threat. It's not just Mohammed Morandi. She says, "Every single last one of you Nazi Islamic terrorists, we will get you all." Okay. She's based in Toronto, I understand, by the way. Now, I'm not going to show you the video here, but this screenshot shows only a small part of the video that she posted with this comment. Most of the video shows the pro-government or the demonstrations held in Iran on Monday in support of the Iranian state. And as anybody can see, there are all kinds of women and children in that demonstration, even babies and strollers. So the implication of this is that she thinks all of those civilians in this video she posted with this comment are Nazi Islamic terrorists, and she's threatening basically anybody who is associated with support for the Iranian government with death. I think you could barely. How else can you construe these two posts? Why this person hasn't been arrested by the Canadian police for threatening lethal violence against people, including civilians, children, women, and an academic, is a mystery. But that's exactly where she belongs. She belongs in prison. She's a criminal, in my opinion, for having uttered these threats. But she's still out there blasting away on social media. And if you want to see a little more about her, she's got as what I understand to be the monarchic version, the pre-Islamic Revolution version of the Iranian flag in her X profile. She says she's an ex-politician, a human rights advocate. She's threatening to dismember a human being, and she calls herself a human rights advocate, raising awareness on occupied Iran, blah, blah, blah. Let me tell you a little more about this character. Goldie Gamadi was a member of the legislature of Ontario, Canada's most populous province, from, I believe it was 2018 to last year. So she was in the governing Conservative Party caucus in the Ontario legislature. And she's formally an international trade lawyer. That's how she's described herself. But she was found by the Law Society of Ontario, of which I am a member in good standing, to have engaged in professional misconduct and had her license to practice law suspended in 2021 after repeatedly failing to cooperate with a regulatory investigation involving some very serious allegations by a client of hers. And in June 2024, she was removed from the Conservative Party caucus by Premier Doug Ford for what his office called repeated serious lapses in judgment after she met with British far-right racist Tommy Robinson. And let me tell you something, folks, if you're not familiar with the politics of Ontario, if you are too right-wing for Doug Ford, the current Premier of Ontario, then you are off the charts right-wing, okay? This guy is himself a hard-right politician. So that tells you all you need to know about this character. And I'm just going to go back here and show you again what her X handle is, at G Gamari, Ghamari. If you're on X, please feel free to reply to her disgusting posts and let you know how you feel about them. Of course, we don't endorse or encourage any threats of violence. We don't want to see that kind of language. But if you're offended by this and are interested in showing solidarity with Professor Morandi, you can do that by replying to her grotesque posts. So let's move on then to the subject of the genocide in Gaza. Before I do that, Rami, I just want to, any comments on this psychopath, Goldie Gamari?
I mean, not at all. It's also, there was a post by Anita Anand, who's basically legitimizing these types of comments, in my opinion, when she keeps calling the Iranian government, the Iranian regime. In some way, I mean, what is a regime? It kind of makes you think of the Nazi regime, right? It's some illegitimate body occupying a people. And it's that kind of dog whistle coming from the higher ups in our governments, in the federal government, that kind of gives a carte blanche to people to, I mean, come up with these threats. I mean, I know damn well if any one of us said something remotely similar related to Palestine, to Zionists, we all know that this would be cover page all over the news. Yet this just went under the rug over Professor Morandi, who's an eloquent, well-spoken person, well-mannered. I don't think, I mean, he could take heat in a debate, but these types of threats really have no place. Yet that post wasn't removed by X, by Elon Musk. And I truly believe that the Canadian government is creating a platform or empowering people to speak this radically against the Iranian people or defenders of Iranian sovereignty.
Indeed. And just so folks, if you didn't hear that name, Anita Anand is the Foreign Minister of Canada, serving under Prime Minister Goldman Sachs, aka Mark J. Carney. Now, that takes us to the genocide, the ongoing Western-backed genocide in occupied Palestine. On January 14th, so that was yesterday, as all of this was unfolding and the corporate media and Western governments were exhibiting outright obsession with the protests in Iran, UNICEF announced that since the so-called ceasefire came into effect on October 11th of last year in Gaza, the Israeli entity has murdered at least 100 children. Now, that would be appalling in a time of open combat between the resistance and the genocidal entity, but this happened during a so-called ceasefire. And this news was almost completely buried while these creeps, these disgusting, vile creeps, I can hardly find the language to express my feelings about them, in the corporate media, were purporting to be concerned about the repression, the violent repression of protests in Iran. These people don't give a damn about Iranians. They don't care about them any more than they care about the 100+ children that Israel murdered during this so-called ceasefire. This is all just, a scam that they're perpetrating on us. Now, today, the authorities in Gaza put out two important posts. That was this morning. First of all, an update on the Israeli aggression during the so-called ceasefire. In the past 24 hours, there were 2 martyrs and 5 injuries in the Gaza Strip. The toll of the Israeli aggression has risen. This is from the beginning of the genocide, and this is the low ball estimate of the relatively conservative health authorities in Gaza. 71,441 dead and 171,329 injuries since October 7th, 2023. That's more than 10% of the population. And when you just look at the destruction in Gaza, consider that it was prior to this this rampage, genocidal rampage in Gaza, one of the most densely populated parts of the world. The starvation tactics, the denial of humanitarian aid, the destruction of the healthcare system. The number of dead is likely to be far in excess of 100,000 and could be several hundred thousand at this stage. So nonetheless, that is the official toll. Since the ceasefire began, according to the authorities in Gaza, 451 have been killed, and total injuries 1,251. So that's an average of nearly 5 killed per day in the ceasefire period, and more than 13 wounded per day. The rate at which Israel has killed and wounded Palestinians has remained remarkably consistent for several weeks now. It's been at that level, about 5 killed per day, about 13 wounded per day for probably about 2 months. So the Israelis seem to have, raised, or I should say lowered, the practice of murdering Palestinians to a science. They somehow managed to, I think this is all very calculated, and I wouldn't be at all surprised if internally there's a quota about how many people the bosses and high up in the Israeli genocidal regime want them to kill on a daily basis. Now, these figures do not include, of course, Palestinians Israel has killed and wounded in the West Bank, or that settlers have killed and wounded in the West Bank. And of course, Gaza remains unlivable. The winter weather is causing severe suffering. Babies are freezing to death as hundreds of thousands of Palestinians seek shelter in makeshift tents, which are periodically bombed by the genocidal Air Force of Israel. So Israel's Western-backed genocide continues, and all that Western corporate media want to talk about is Iran. And I should say that even if every allegation leveled against Iran by the West is true, and they aren't all true, not by any stretch of the imagination, a lot of it is conjecture. So, for example, the death toll, nobody in the West really knows what the death toll is in these protests, and we can't say how many of those protesters were killed by people, for example, who had been planted by the Mossad or the CIA in these protests to foment violence. And if you think about it, and I'm not saying that all the protesters who have been killed by security forces in Iran fall into this category, but when you think about it, if you're trying to bring about massive instability in Iran to the point where the government is overthrown due to unrest in the streets, what would you do? You would use, basically, if you had weapons and you were firing upon the security forces, you do so from areas where there are congregations of unarmed protesters, so that you would attract fire from the security forces and ensure that they kill people who are unarmed and innocent. Now, I'm in no position to tell you how often that has happened and how many deaths that it has caused, but I have no hesitation in saying that it is very likely a tactic that these agents of the Mossad are employing. And even Israel and people like Mike Pompeo in the United States have admitted that there are Mossad agents on the ground and that they are armed. So this is no conspiracy theory here. If they're prepared to admit that, then we should have no trouble accepting that at least some of the innocents who have been killed by security forces were killed because they were put in harm's way by Mossad agents who were firing from areas where these unarmed protesters had congregated. Now, returning to the other statement that the media office in Gaza put out today, They gave us a breakdown of the total ceasefire violations, 1,244 over 95 days. And they broke it down as follows: 402 direct shooting crimes against civilians, 66 military incursions into residential areas, 581 shelling attacks targeting unarmed citizens and homes, 195 crimes of demolishing and blowing up civilian buildings, 50 cases of illegal kidnapping and detention. In the humanitarian sector, Israel continues its policy of engineered starvation and dehydration. Only 24,611 trucks entered Gaza out of the 57,000 agreed upon, representing only 43% of the required aid. For what it's worth, that is an uptick from the first few weeks. For several weeks of this so-called ceasefire, the Israelis had allowed in less than 30% of the amount of aid that they agreed to let in, but they're still well under 50%. And again, all of this is being ignored for the most part by the corporate media. And furthermore, the occupation has allowed only 12% of the agreed fuel to enter, with only 601 trucks arriving out of the 4,750 stipulated in the protocol. That fuel is, of course, vitally important in winter conditions. Without it, how are they going to keep displaced persons, or even persons who are living in damaged infrastructure, their homes, what remains of them, how are they going to keep them warm without fuel? The electricity generation system has been utterly destroyed. The shelter crisis has reached catastrophic levels. They continue as Israel continues to block the entry of mobile homes, caravans, and tents. This has left over 1.5 million displaced people exposed to harsh winter conditions, leading to the collapse of, well, I can't see it anymore because Rami's covered it up with a comment. Thank you. Leading to the collapse of 50 damaged buildings and deaths due to extreme cold inside unusable tents. So that is the update on the genocide. Again, this is just Gaza. It doesn't, in the interest of time, we're not going to cover all the horrors that Israel continues to commit in the West Bank as well. And by the way, even within the 1948 boundaries of Israel, there is severe repression of Palestinians taking place, although they are not being subjected anywhere near to the level of violence that people in Gaza and the West Bank are being subjected. Now, with all of this going on, the Trumpian con man, Steve Witkoff, who is, again, I stress, a war criminal who should be rotting in a jail cell at The Hague, not just for facilitating this genocide, but also for, participating in that deception operation involving the Iranians. He was the guy who was supposedly negotiating on behalf of Trump with these people while they were preparing to attack Iran. So he's a con man. He's a war criminal. Nothing he says should be taken seriously. But for what it's worth, he put out a statement yesterday on X that they have launched phase 2 of the president's 20-point plan to end the Gaza conflict, moving from ceasefire to demilitarization. Notice he puts that first. Technocratic governance and reconstruction. Phase 2, he says, establishes a transitional technocratic Palestinian administration in Gaza called the National Committee for the Administration of Gaza, and begins the full demilitarization and reconstruction of Gaza, primarily the disarmament of all unauthorized personnel. Again, stressing demilitarization. The U.S. expects Hamas to comply fully with its obligations, including the immediate return of the final deceased hostage. Failure to do so will bring serious consequences, as though the Palestinians are not currently experiencing serious consequences. And then he says, importantly, phase 1 delivered historic humanitarian aid. Historic. You saw the figure is 43% of what they agreed to give. Maintained the ceasefire, even though Israel has killed on average 5 people a day and wounded on average 13 a day. Returned all living hostages and the remains of 27 of the 28 deceased hostages. That actually is the one true statement in this ridiculous screed. And he says, we're deeply grateful to Egypt, Turkey, and Qatar for their indispensable mediation efforts that made all progress to date possible. And of course, they have failed miserably to ensure that Israel has complied with its obligations. I just want to point out here, when he talks about demilitarization and Hamas complying fully with its obligations, these bald-faced liars in the White House continue to insist that Hamas agreed to disarm. It entered into no such agreement. You can go check the 20-point peace plan yourself. okay, the one that was actually signed by Hamas, there is nothing in there about Hamas agreeing to be disarmed. And every single time they have been given an opportunity to talk about this issue, they have said, we will not disarm. They have been absolutely consistent in that regard. And as we've said before, it is an obscenity. It's an obscenity to demand that the victims of a genocide be disarmed when the perpetrator of the ongoing genocide remains armed to the teeth. Anybody who takes that position is a disgusting racist, and we can't condemn you strongly and loudly enough. So don't be fooled by this claim that Hamas agreed to disarm. And all of this is a setup, folks, because we know that they aren't going to agree to disarm. And this will be used as a justification at some point to resume the full-blown extermination of the Palestinian people in Gaza, which ultimately I believe will fail, but that's, I think, where all of this is ultimately heading. And before we conclude on this subject, Rami, maybe you can say a few words about this technocratic Palestinian administration in Gaza. I think this is an important development. Who are these people?
Yeah, but just before we go there, I mean, maintain the ceasefire. Essentially what we're reading here is that this is the new normal in Gaza. Continuous bombings, no right for the Palestinians to defend themselves against these bombings. I kind of feel really insulted by reading that. But yeah, so there was oh God, I lost my notes. There's a committee that was formed related to the new Board of Peace. It seems like the person that would be leading it's not the Board of Peace, right? It's the technocratic government that is kind of represented, that is operating under the Board of Peace. We don't really have names yet of who will be on the Board of Peace, but that technocratic government, at the moment, it seems like there's this person who's claimed to be a kind of like a partisan-less Palestinian who was born and raised in Gaza, but that grew up in that operated out of West Bank. His name is Shat. It's Shat family there's some of them in Montreal that are from Gaza, and they are like the person who will be kind of heading that technocratic government. Seems to be someone who was part of reconstruction efforts, rebuilding efforts in Gaza. And then it doesn't seem like many of the people necessarily are historically part of the Hamas political party. Most of them are affiliated with the PA in some way or another, or are deans of universities, such as the representative for education. I had some notes on this that I can't really seem to find right now. But Dimitri, while I look for them, maybe you want to comment on the board.
Sure. I just want to share with people what Hamas has said about this. Rami, I'm trying to put the image 12 up on the screen, but for some reason I can't do that. Here we go. So this is from the Hamas leader Bassem Naim, who, by the way, I believe is a medical doctor. And the statement, which was posted today, the announcement of the formation of a temporary transitional Palestinian committee, notice the word temporary, to manage the affairs of the Gaza Strip in all fields and across its entire area is an important step. So they're welcoming this in implementing the agreement and a move in the right direction, whether to stabilize the ceasefire and avoid a return to war, or to dismantle the catastrophic humanitarian crisis and prepare for comprehensive reconstruction. Most importantly, the formation of the committee should be a starting point for a Palestinian political path that begins with achieving Palestinian unity, ending the division, and transforming the temporary committee into a national unity government, and confirms that the unity of the Palestinian political geography and confronts the policies of the fascist right wing and the Zionist entity. As you can see here, there's nothing in here about Hamas disarming. They certainly aren't going to agree to that. I'd be astonished if they agree to that, given Israel's history of brutalizing unarmed civilians. I think that their best protection at this stage is to retain some capacity to defend themselves if the genocidal military decides to remain in the Gaza Strip and deprive the Palestinians there of even more land. So, Rami, have you found your notes?
Yes, I did. But also, just to maybe mention, is that the National Committee for the Administration of Gaza is still operating within the Board of Peace, and on that Board of Peace, there'll be like these people appointed by Trump. There were some speculations of Keir Starmer, Tony Blair, and all of these essentially people that are complicit in the genocide, as well as other representatives from Turkey, Qatar, Jordan, UAE. And it seemed, I don't know how much legitimacy or actual agency this National Committee for the Administration of Gaza will actually have. But yes, as I was mentioning before, right, so the names on this committee, there's Ali Shath, the chair, who's a former senior official in the Palestinian Authority, who had played a big role in kind of managing budgets and reconstruction. You also have Abdul Karim Ashur, who's the head of an agricultural relief or aid organization in Gaza. So it's a lot of people from the nonprofit sector or academic sectors in Gaza that will be kind of spearheading these portfolios. Other than Shath, who is someone who was born in Gaza but operates out of the West Bank. I don't know. My gut feeling over here is that this National Committee for the Administration of Gaza seems like it's designed to fail, specifically since it's supervised by a board that is not consistent of any Palestinian, and that pretty much have veto rights over that. I don't want to like build any form of similarities with other forms of governments around the world, but we're kind of seeing Trump's attitude towards kind of removing autonomy and sovereignty from countries through kind of these contingent-based governance, right? So like in Venezuela right now, Trump is basically saying that the Americans decide for everything that's going on there. We don't know exactly how this is being organized, but it's kind of creating this division of power and removing any form of true authority between the people governing and the people. So it's a recurring pattern, especially with, I mean, we might see this as well in Iran, hopefully not, but that's kind of the pulse that I'm getting, at least while reading this board of
Right.
the National Committee for the Administration of Gaza.
By the way, I see our comrade Leila Hatoum in the chat. Leila, I'm assuming it's the Leila that I know from Lebanon, a wonderful journalist. Thank you for joining us today, Leila. Good to see you there. Before we go to Q&A, I want to just say a word about an interview that Scott Ritter gave a few days ago on Judging Freedom. And the background to this clip that I'm going to show you from that interview is that, you know, many of you will know this, those who are regular audience members for Reason to Resist. We have been critical on this program over the past year of people in the alternative media who have been embracing the narrative that Donald Trump genuinely seeks peace, particularly with respect to the Ukraine war. And the argument that we made, and I'll tell you my own personal view about this, evolved a little bit over time. When Donald Trump returned to the White House in January of last year, up until that point in time, I believed, based upon his rhetoric and his first term in the White House, primarily the latter, that the man was a bloodthirsty warmonger and a war criminal. You know, for example, the killing of Qasem Soleimani, the murder of Qasem Soleimani was an extraordinarily provocative act and a war crime. That was, the top Iranian general. He did everything possible to facilitate Israel's crimes against the Palestinian people. The Great March of Return in the Gaza Strip happened during Trump's first administration, in that, which nobody talked about when October 7th came around. For over a year, Israeli snipers were just gunning down unarmed civilians in a peaceful demonstration in Gaza. Refugees, Palestinian refugees who have a right to return to their homeland under international law, were simply walking up to the fence of the concentration camp unarmed and were being mercilessly gunned down. And that all happened on Trump's watch, and I think this undoubtedly was a major reason for the October 7th, 2023 military operation by Palestinian resistance groups. The Great March of Return showed them that peaceful protest was going to be completely and utterly ineffectual against these psychopaths in Tel Aviv. In any case, I could go on and on about Trump's first record. So my natural inclination at that point in January of last year when he returned to the White House was to believe that he was going to be every bit as violent and criminal as he had been in his first administration, if not more so. But because he reportedly, it was Trump through Witkoff, pressured the Israelis to enter into a ceasefire the day before Trump returned to the White House. And because he was saying all the right things about, the war in Ukraine, that it was unwinnable, speaking the truth about that war. It was unwinnable, that it had been provoked, that it was a proxy war. I was prepared to not believe him, but to give him an opportunity to prove that the rhetoric of peace that he employed so extensively in the presidential election in 2024, that he meant it. So I kind of reserved judgment. I did a piece on this, on Reason to Resist in I think it was early February of last year. I stopped giving him any, I wouldn't say it was even the benefit of the doubt. It was just attach any weight whatsoever to the peace narrative. When Israel tore up the ceasefire agreement in March of last year, with Trump's approval, they refused to withdraw from Rafah as they had agreed to do under that agreement, and then just began starving people. Just began starving the entire population of Gaza, and continued to do that for months on end as they were killing 100, 150, 200 civilians a day through various forms of bombardment, shootings, and so forth. So at that point, it was clear to me that he was going to be at least as bad, if not worse. But nonetheless, for months, prominent voices in the alternative media continued to cling to the belief, and they would express this view over and over again, that Trump actually genuinely desired peace and that he was being undermined by others. He was the victim. Netanyahu was undermining him. Rubio was undermining him. The European vassals were undermining him. Zelensky was undermining him. The neocons in Washington were undermining him. Poor Donald Trump was doing everything he could to bring about peace in Ukraine and elsewhere, but the forces of evil were arrayed against him. And as I said over and over again on this program, that was complete and utter bollocks. Trump lied from day one. And the reason why he lied during the presidential election campaign about seeking peace is because that's what American voters wanted him to do, but for the most part. I just showed you the poll at the beginning of this program, which revealed that 70% of Americans, despite all of the propaganda in the corporate media, don't want the United States to intervene militarily in Iran. The overwhelming predisposition of Americans and people of conscience all over the world is to avoid war. So Trump understood this. He didn't take a rocket scientist to figure it out. So he lied through his teeth about wanting peace so that he could win the peace vote. And the stupid Democrats basically ceded to him that argument. They didn't even make a pretense of wanting to bring an end to the war in Gaza, the war on Gaza, or the war in Ukraine. In fact, they refused to talk to the Russians at all. So this brings me to Scott Ritter's interview this week. Finally, Mr. Ritter, who has done many fine things in his life, has made invaluable contributions to the public discourse, did very courageous work in opposing the weapons of mass destruction hoax that justified the Iraq war. He finally acknowledged that he was wrong. So I'm going to show you this clip because I think it really is an important acknowledgement.
I guess that you were not surprised when President Trump stated recently to interviewers from the New York Times that his own mind and his own morality, and not the law, are the only restraints on his exercise of power in the international scene.
Well, I don't know. I'm one of these people that is often criticized today for being naive, for having trust and faith in Donald Trump that he could be sincere about his desire for peace. I mean, he ran on a platform that promoted a number of ideas, one of which was the preservation of the constitutional republic over American empire. You remember that?
Oh, yes.
How important it is to maintain
yes,
this.
I did not have that faith in him, but you did, and I gave you a lot of credit for it.
I was hoping beyond hope that this would be the case. And, this is a man who, said things that resonate with me, that he could reduce the defense budget by 50%. And I'm like, yes, you can. You can even do it more. And he said, that's what we want. There's no reason to be spending this money, he said.
Just pause there. He said he was going to reduce the defense budget by 50%, and now he's saying he's going to increase it by $5 billion. Yes. And that's the official defense budget. Vijay Prashad did a study with some colleagues that showed that the actual defense budget before Trump came to office was $1.6 trillion. the real defense budget. So this lunatic wants to add 500 billion on top of that after saying he was going to cut it by 50%.
We're not here to prop up empire. We're here for America first. I'm like, gosh, if he just does this, we'll be doing great. And then the biggest thing that got me was that he was saying that he was supportive of peace with Russia. It now turns out that everything he said was a lie. And it not just a lie that evolved over time. He was lying to us the moment he said it. We now know this.
Standing ovation, Scott Ritter. Thank you very much, Scott.
But we cannot forget either, Dimitri, that when there was the 12-day war, just prior to that, Scott Ritter was responsible in basically promoting the fact that Iran was at fault for not submitting itself and calling for this to put an end to their nuclear program. So in some way, as much as it's good to hear that he's going back on his, he dropped some nasty comments to you, I believe, as well. He called you a Canadian that shouldn't have an opinion on what's going on in the United States.
Oh, he called me many things, actually. He went ballistic when I accused Tulsi Gabbard of betraying her principles because she started supporting this crazy narrative that the Iranians were on the verge of a nuke, which was to justify the last attack.
And he was basically promoting the fact that Iran was not clear enough that it was not seeking a nuclear bomb or that it wasn't willing to put caps on its nuclear enrichment program. He kind of played a role in justifying the 12-day war. So as much as we can, of course, it's never too late for anyone to change sides or to recognize what's right. He does have a big audience, and these statements that he's done in the past do have big consequences on how wars are legitimized.
And this is really important. So this is not about gotcha. This is not about, I was right, you were wrong. That's not the issue here. The issue here is American voters are going to be going to the polls in November. And if we want them to vote, as I do, and I know Rami does, and I suspect everybody listening to us today wants them to vote in a way that is in the interests of the American people. What is for the good of the American people and the broader world. If we want them to cast that kind of a vote, they need to know the truth. They need to understand what they're dealing with. And if they are operating under this illusion, this delusion that Donald Trump genuinely desires peace, they're more likely to vote for him. Okay, so this is really consequential. We have to get this right. It's not just about gotcha. I don't care about that at all. So I'm really glad to see Scott Ritter say this. And as a matter of fact, this morning, as I was working out at the gym, I was listening to Glenn Deason interview Lawrence Wilkerson, the former chief of staff to Secretary of State Colin Powell. And he said essentially, although much more briefly, the same thing. He said, when Trump came to power, I was hopeful of this and I was hopeful of that, but now it seems like that's all just flushed down the toilet. So it's not just Scott. There are others who are coming to realize this, and we cannot, acknowledge the truth quickly enough. We need to get the message out there. This man does not want peace. Okay? Stop saying that. You're harming the cause. It isn't true. There's no basis to say it. He's a pathological liar, and he's going to get us all killed unless we remove this man from power as quickly as possible. So, Rami, unless you have anything to add, and if you do, please, by all means, maybe we can take some questions from our friends.
It's just a tiny thought that I had, going through the stream today. How there's a lot of people in the, I call it the pseudo left. Sometimes I call it the mason jar left, that are rallying behind the whole overthrow of the Iranian government, it seems like there's a bit of trust that the Americans are looking for the best intentions for these marginal protesters in Iran or in Venezuela. But I just truly don't understand how anyone could have faith in America being an honest partner. There's no better ally of the Americans than the EU, Denmark, Canada. And the closest allies of the United States are the ones facing threats today as well. So while the empire is collapsing, I just truly don't understand how anyone in the global South can truly think that they can have honest support from the United States. Now's the time, while the empire is crumbling and shaking, now's the time to go to strike harder and to resist more. And if the Americans want us to oppose Iran, that's probably the time to support them even more then.
Right. By the way, since you're on the subject of Greenland, I found a couple of interesting factoids this morning. watching Lawrence Wilkerson, did you know there are 30 U.S. military bases in Greenland? 30 U.S. military bases. And the Europeans, Donald Trump. One thing I'll say about Donald Trump is that he is more entertaining than Biden. That's the one good thing about Donald Trump. He said that the Europeans had sent a dog sled to Greenland to defend it from U.S. forces. And so Lawrence Wilkerson was saying that something like this, that the Norwegians sent 2 soldiers as part of a European military contingent, and another European NATO member sent 10 soldiers. So they've allowed the U.S. to build 30 military bases on Greenland. And by the way, I'll just put this up on the screen. You understand why Donald Trump is so obsessed with Greenland. This map will help you to understand, but I'll come back in a second. It's all over, folks. The United States controls Greenland. I mean, whether or not it formalizes its control, the stupid Europeans, these slavish vassals, allowed the United States to acquire effective control over this entire largely uninhabited piece of earth. And so what are they going to do now? What are they going to do now? I mean, it's really just a question of formalizing U.S. control over Greenland because they control it. And in a way, part of me wants them to do that, not because I want to see the people of Greenland come under the thumb of the Americans. They already are under the thumb of the Americans. But because I think that will be the nail in the coffin of NATO. They will no longer be able to maintain with a straight face the fiction that NATO guarantees the security of its members. I mean, that would be, I think, a death blow. And there's nothing that would make me happier to see that craven, existentially dangerous military alliance flushed down the toilet of history. So we'll have to see where all of that's going to lead. But just going back to this map, the Arctic, which has massive resources, and if it becomes navigable, and it is becoming navigable, more so by the year, could be, will have strategically important trade routes. It's essentially dominated by the Russian Federation, as you can see in this map. The currently, at least from a de jure perspective, in terms of sovereignty, the United States only has a small piece of that pie up there in Alaska. If it wants to be able to compete with the Russian Federation, logistically, for control of the resources of the Arctic, it needs control of Greenland. Canada has a big chunk of that pie as well, but Canada's military is a pipsqueak. And frankly, I hope it remains that way. The last thing I want to see is Canada join in the militarization of the Arctic, which unfortunately it's doing, but it just doesn't have the means to go as far as the United States, not even close. But that's what this is all about. This is all about, securing control of Arctic resources and the logistical challenges the U.S. currently confronts in doing that. That's, in my opinion, that's what's going on here. And of course, Greenland itself has massive resources that the U.S. wants to exploit, or the U.S. oligarchy, I should say, wants to exploit for its own benefit, not for the benefit of the American people. So with that, Rami, shall we take some questions?
Absolutely. I have a couple of them that I was able to save. But yes, feel free to keep posting your questions in the chat. Where are they? Comments, start. Okay. So, okay. So yeah, there's just one statement over here by Bramplins, who says, today I saw a post from MEE or Roya News saying the group for Gaza has 15 Palestinian people. I can't understand why Rami says no. I'm referring to there's a committee for the technocratic committee governing Gaza is consisting of 15 Palestinians, but it was appointed by the Board of Peace that essentially decides how that committee can function or under which extent it can. So this is what I mean, that it's not governed by Palestinians. There's 15 Palestinians that are running the committee, but do they actually have the agency and freedom that the committee should have? I think that's what's a bit confusing at the moment. Then we have this question from Anton Stampfel, who says, do you think Trump will also want the Canadian Arctic region? I just to start, I mean, Trump has claims on all of Canada. These were these discussions that was more popular, I believe, like a year or two ago. So it's the Arctic region is just one part of the many claims that Trump has against Canada. But Dimitri, maybe you want to, cover that.
Yeah, I mean, again, there's a certain unreality to this whole discussion we're having about Canada becoming the 51st state, because in many ways we are the 51st state. I mean, the United States is by far our largest trading partner. We are existentially dependent from an economic perspective because of decades of economic mismanagement by Canadian political leaders. We should have been developing our own capacity to produce domestically the things that we need for the well-being of Canadians. We should have been diversifying our trade relations, but instead we allowed our economy to become hollowed out, deindustrialized, and placed enormous and excessive emphasis on our trade relations with the United States. The United States could cut us off completely from a trade perspective and would suffer to a far lesser degree than we would, because trade with Canada constitutes a much smaller proportion of overall American trade than our trade with Canada, with the United States, constitutes of our overall trade. So it's the United States is the elephant in the trade room for Canada. And that's, again, the result of decades of policy, but also we've adopted a foreign policy which is essentially a carbon copy of American foreign policy. We've entered into NORAD. We've integrated our military forces in NATO. We've got our intelligence agency, CSIS, as part of this white supremacist Five Eyes, which is dominated by the CIA, and includes New Zealand, the UK, Australia, and the United States. So what sovereignty does Canada have, really, at the end of the day? It has some, but not much. So there's a certain air of unreality to the whole thing, but the fact of the matter is we do retain some degree of sovereignty, and I think Trump does want to eliminate it. And the thing that has outraged me as a Canadian is that, Trump, his kidnapping of President Maduro in Venezuela was essentially supported by the entire Canadian political elite. So rather than think, if we encourage Trump to behave in this way, we might be next. Trump might try a stunt like that and just say, we're going to send military forces into Canada. I wouldn't exclude that possibility at all. And in part because of Trump's obsessive desire to control the Arctic.
And then here's this question by Marge Maple 6091, who says, when do you think the tipping point will be for Russia and China?
That's a good question. I'm surprised we haven't already reached it. Any number of things could tip this over at any particular point in time. So, if the Americans, for example, go a bit too far in arming, they just did an $11 billion arms package with Taiwan, which caused the PRC to engage in massive military exercises, basically temporarily setting up a blockade around the island, which they can quite easily do. If they continue down that path of militarizing Taiwan, and if the Taiwanese puppet of Washington starts talking explicitly about independence, well, that could easily provoke an invasion by Taiwan, and who knows where that of Taiwan by the PRC. It wouldn't be an invasion strictly speaking, because Taiwan is part of the People's Republic of China. But if they send their military forces in there, that could get out of hand real quick. I think the Orezhnik strike on military facilities in Lvov a few days ago by the Russians was an ominous sign, one that's entirely understandable after, the proxies of the Trump regime attempted to kill Vladimir Putin. I think that's exactly what they tried to do. And I think they tried to do that, frankly, with the consent and even perhaps the direction of Donald Trump himself at a time when Trump was claiming to be negotiating with the Russian Federation. So, those kinds of stunts could easily get us into an all-out war between Russia and China on the one side and the West on the other. If they attack Iran, I don't know that the Chinese and the Russians this time are going to be as standoffish as they were the last time. And I think it'll be clear to them at this point, if there's another military operation against the Islamic Republic, that the Americans are hell-bent on not only removing the Islamic regime from power, but also I think the ultimate goal, as we've said on this program, is not simply to change the regime in Iran, but to actually destroy and partition the country. And that could cause, major reaction from, if they go that far, from the Russians and the Chinese.
I think Trump exposed the power that the United States have in their ability to end conflicts, and it's intentional why they're not ending them in Ukraine, in Palestine, in China, anywhere around the world. And I'm starting to think that maybe the intention for not putting an end to the Ukraine war is specifically so that America can keep meddling all over the world and keeping Russia distracted in the war that has been kind of putting a heavy strain on Russia. Now, I believe that doesn't forgive Russia for their inaction in Iran, in Gaza, in Venezuela, although I think it makes it a bit more understandable. But for the case of China, I truly do not understand what's going on. If Iran falls, which doesn't seem very likely, at least right now, this is a bigger friction or a bigger kind of more pressure on China and its ability to start exporting products to Europe through this land tunnel going from China, this modern day Silk Road. The loss of Venezuela, I mean, America is feeling emboldened. They were able to remove Maduro with very little opposition from the superpowers of Russia and China. And that's pushing them to go even more ambitious with Iran and Cuba. On my interview with this comrade in Cuba, Ivan Ernesto, he spoke about the need of building a global South solidarity independent from Russia and China, just because it's a lot easier it's a lot more predictable to have solidarity from the masses all over the world than it is from having it from these superpowers due to their own issues that they're facing. I mean, China's trying to ramp up its exports. It's aware that it might be cut off of trade with the United States if they get too ambitious. There's also pressure in Taiwan and the South China Sea. So it doesn't seem. I mean, I don't see what's really. I truly don't see a limit to how far America can go before China reacts. It would have to be something happening in Taiwan. But I mean, what's worse than a genocide in Gaza? What's worse than kidnapping a president in Venezuela and dropping, kind of nuclear-sized missiles into Iranian territory back during the 12-day war, or around the time of the peace negotiation, the nuclear negotiations.
Right.
So, okay, this is an interesting question. Would you provide pro bono legal advice for Professor Morandi against Goldie Gamari, considering, she's Canadian?
Without hesitation. So, Professor Morandi, if you're looking for pro bono legal advice, give me a call.
He has your number, right?
Yes, he has a number. We communicated with Professor Morandi yesterday. Our production director is trying to line up an interview from him, and he's been very busy. He told us he proposed Wednesday yesterday, but then we weren't able to make that happen. So hopefully we'll be speaking directly about this, and I'll raise the subject of legal advice if we have the opportunity to interview him this week.
Okay, and then maybe one last question. Let's see. Maybe this one over here by Philip Blair, who says, Canada's disregard for international humanitarian law is very disturbing to me. What's the likelihood of this changing within the next 5 to 10 to 20 years? Will Canada's soft power be rebuilt? And maybe we could go just an inch further. Carney was in China. I think he still is in China right now. I don't know. Anyways,
Yes.
2 days ago, there was some Canadian presence in China trying to strengthen trade. I'm not very hopeful of, this could maybe be used as leverage to bring back better trade with the United States, trying to fake a little offer somewhere else just to get Trump, just to have more leverage in negotiations with Trump. But Dimitri, any comments on that?
Sorry, I was reading a comment and I didn't hear what was the question exactly?
The question is, how likely is it that Canada will change its It's respect
for international law, essentially. So there's really no, first of all, the current leaders of the two parties that have dominated Canadian politics for the entire post-World War II period, which are the Conservatives and the Liberals. We're talking about Mark Carney, aka Prime Minister Goldman Sachs, and this yapping Zionist Chihuahua, Pierre Poilievre, the leader of the Conservatives. They have nothing but contempt for international law in every conceivable respect. They only invoke it against the geopolitical rivals of Washington. And when it comes to Western compliance with international law, they don't think, I think it's quite clear that the West is under any obligation to comply with international law. Interestingly, though, there has been a person from an earlier era of the Liberal Party elite by the name of Lloyd Axworthy, who was the foreign minister, who has been quite outspoken in criticizing the policies, the foreign policies of the Carney government. Even though Lloyd Axworthy came from the Liberal Party. So there are people, inside the Liberal Party, at least people from the, prior era. I'm going back like 20, 30 years, I think. That's when Lloyd Axworthy was the foreign minister, who are very concerned about the contempt the Canadian government is currently showing for international law. But I don't see anybody in the Liberals or Conservatives who has a reasonable prospect of becoming a leader of that party changing course. Now, there is a leadership contest going on in the New Democratic Party, which is supposed to be a left-leaning social democratic party. And one of the people in that, we were supporting the efforts of Yves Engler, an outspoken anti-imperialist, to enter the NDP leadership race, and they blocked him for the most bogus reasons from being a candidate. But there is somebody in the leadership race who's not quite as determined in terms of anti-imperialism as Yves Engler is, but who might take the party into a much more respectful, and I'm talking about respect for international law, direction. And that is Avi Lewis, who is the partner, the husband of Naomi Klein, and it was the documentary filmmaker who produced This Changes Everything, a well-known documentary about the climate crisis. So Avi comes from a long pedigree of NDP party stalwarts, and he's been outspoken in condemning the genocide in Gaza. But how far is he willing to go, for example, in condemning what the United States is doing in Iran, or condemning what the United States is doing in Venezuela? He's not willing to go far enough, in my opinion, at least not now during the NDP leadership contest. And even if he ultimately wins and ultimately does adopt a completely principled policy with respect to international law, he's going to have a difficult time winning in this country, because the levers of power are controlled by the oligarchy. And, it's doubtful that they will allow somebody like that, somebody who has the kind of commitment to international law that, for example, Yves Engler has, to assume power in this country. Personally, I think we're going to have to achieve revolutionary change by means other than the electoral process. But I'd like to be proven wrong about that.
Dimitri, should we call it a day?
Sure. Thanks, everybody. Great talking to you again today. We will, tomorrow I'm going to be interviewing a comrade from Venezuela, Diego Sequeira. You might have seen him. He's been doing a lot of interviews this week about the events in Venezuela. He is extremely knowledgeable about the politics of the country. And we will be publishing that interview probably tomorrow afternoon. So if you're interested in what's happening in Venezuela, I recommend you keep an eye out for that video. But for now, we're signing off, and we wish you all, again, a peaceful and prosperous 2026. Peace out.